Oh, he's not dead. Hello, welcome back to Critics Critique. I'm Eric.
And I'm Will.
And we're here today for another episode to talk about The Last Jedi, because that horse isn't dead yet, and talk about Revenge of the Sith, because of basically a meme that Will came across.
Yeah, that's pretty much the genesis of why we're doing this.
So what did you learn, Will?
I learned that the IMDb score for The Last Jedi is actually lower than the IMDb score for The Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
Which, fun fact, that was 14 years ago. Just wanted to make you all feel as old as possible. But yeah, one of the most reviled... it itself is not the most reviled, but the prequels in general are typically one of the most reviled series of movies. But this movie actually has a higher IMDb score than a movie that came out in 2017.
Here are the statistics for you guys. You can see the budgets. Like, the budget for The Last Jedi is like twice the production budget for Revenge of the Sith, which is pretty cool. But also the gross. Well, to be fair, the gross isn't even that much more. It's not twice as much or whatever. It's funny. There's like a decline, but I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up to we didn't have a lot of options back when Revenge of the Sith came out.
It's still like $500 million, though.
Just a quick breakdown of what you're seeing here. Both of them are weirdly well reviewed. The Last Jedi has way better critics reviews and polar opposite user reviews. They're insane. But the funny thing is when you look at Revenge of the Sith, like across the board, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, IMDb all have almost the same numbers for what the reviews are for everybody. And so it's like everybody has kind of settled universally on them being like a C.
Right, yeah.
Which is complicated.
A B-.
The reason for comparing the two of these is to kind of talk about some of the few things that, yes, despite Last Jedi being a beaten dead horse, I feel like people haven't talked about. And I think obviously the critical reaction to The Last Jedi is something that's worth dissecting, even, if it was insane. Like, freaking, you've got like a 90 people saying this is the best movie that they've ever seen, and people saying that this is like garbage day. Fine, I made the reference. I'm sorry.
That's Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, if you don't know.
And so on Metacritic, The Last Jedi has 0 negative critic reviews. Not one negative critics reviews. They're all mixed to positive. But all the user reviews total up to like a 4 out of 10.
So that's kind of why we're here. Just a reminder, if you haven't watched the show in a while, or you just watch each episode as it comes out, what we're all about is deciding, maybe not deciding, but at least discussing whether or not the critical and or audience responses for a movie were justified. So The Last Jedi is ripe to discuss. Even though it came out a while back, now that the dust has settled, we can get a much clearer look at what's been going on.
Both of these are received well, but The Last Jedi is received in a way more polar direction. It's way more positive and way more negative versus Revenge of the Sith, which is settled on this like C, low B grading. And so I'm going to break down some of the positives and negatives.
Everything is being shifted in an opposite way to what the audience expected after 7. Brian's made Star Wars fresh and new.
So breaking down everything I could find in the massive like balloon of supporters, defensiveness, hatred, every kind of reaction in the spectrum from kill yourself to I'll never need another movie again. For The Last Jedi, the positives that people talk about are that the movie...
It's about family.
Subverts expectations by not being about family. And the depiction of the Force in The Last Jedi steers away from the midichlorian explanation of the prequels to be more of an open and mystical understanding of how it works, more like the original trilogy, which I think a lot more people respond to. Apparently they do. People have said that special characters don't have to be blood related is a thing. You know, the overarching idea that Rey's parentage being nobody, and the ending of the movie opening up to how, like, you don't have to come from royalty or a special family in the Force or somewhere important in order to be something important is a good message. Kylo Ren's arc in the movie is received as excellent. Luke's character by some audience members is seen as like a great comeback and a natural extension of his past. Some people say that the production design of the movie is fantastic and the action direction is excellent across the board. The last positive comment that I could dig out of everything is that the theme of failure in the movie, you know, that is the excuse for a lot of things that people don't like, but still it's there. The theme of failure in the movie begins to wrap all three trilogies into one story. What The Last Jedi does is makes it canon to the story that the characters acknowledge that that time period was full of mistakes and was full of characters that don't act the way that is in their best interest or wise or anything like they become. What do you think about that?
It was pretty.
No, I mean, what do you think about the idea of somebody talking about the story, like The Last Jedi being the first movie to turn all 9 movies into like a one story?
Based on failure?
Kind of, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I walked away from that movie thinking it was the okayest movie I've ever seen. Which was, oddly enough, more disappointing than if I had hated it. But, like, for example, I know that Mark Hamill, when preparing for the renewed role of Luke Skywalker, had this idea in his head about, you know, that he had a child and that his child found his lightsaber and turned it on and accidentally killed himself. And that deeply affected Luke and made him more nihilistic, made him more of a failure than he was already. And then he lost Kylo Ren. Rather, he lost Ben Solo and the rest of his students, meaning that he had made the ultimate failure. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't go so far as to put Yoda at the forefront of that. I would say that Obi-Wan Kenobi is the greater failure, even though I know Yoda says, failed I have, go into exile I must, whatever.
Obi-Wan is basically, you're right, he's surviving the prequel trilogy, but the results of the mistakes that he made don't manifest until the original trilogy.
Right. When he realizes that, you know, he doesn't have to keep fighting Darth Vader, and he gives up. And I know saying gives up makes it sound like a very negative thing, but he understands that he doesn't have to keep doing this, and he's like, oh, well, this is how I win, and he stops. And Anakin, or Darth Vader, immediately cuts him down, but doesn't really, because he continues to live on.
So, Last Jedi negatives. Okay? So, all of you are exhausting. Oh my gosh! There is a 6-hour breakdown of every little thing that this guy has a problem with in The Last Jedi from the beginning. The power dynamic is mysteriously flipped. When we come back, the Resistance is called the Resistance is because the First Order is small and are up-and-comers. And while they do destroy the central planet of the Republic in that movie, which suggests that they all of a sudden do have a ton of power, they also lost their Death Star.
So,
and their main base of operations.
According to non-movie sources, I'll call them. If you can't see me rolling my eyes, I'm not doing it hard enough. The Republic's government rotates from planet to planet, and it happened to be where they were during that period.
They also blew up 5 planets, by the way.
Right, but they were real close together, weren't they?
I think so. But I can't imagine,
But I think the Republic planets were like way out there. Like
I'm just gonna go with like the general gist of the point was they killed everyone in charge. It's just the problem is
the other side of that is the Republic government considered the First Order to be such an insignificant problem.
Yeah.
That the Resistance were people who were like, no, this is a serious problem. We're going to go deal with it ourselves. And that's why the Resistance doesn't have as much oomph as you think it might.
And that's another critique of the movie is that kind of subplot where nobody will come to support the Resistance when they're on their planet. Suggests that they're just left abandoned by everybody, which I guess would kind of make sense on why the First Order is such a threat to them in the movie. But it's so underdeveloped and not explained in a movie that spends like 25 to 30 minutes on a planet talking about the people who pay for both sides of the war.
So it subverted your expectations.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that a good thing?
The subversion of expectations is also listed as a negative in that most of the ways they try to do it answer questions that you didn't necessarily have to answer in this movie. They kind of jump the gun and try to close down a lot of interesting threads and questions that the movies had. People claim that a lot of the stuff is way too jokey and winking at the audience. Like, Luke, instead of, like, tossing the lightsaber to the side or, like, trying to break it or trying to do something with, like, some gravitas that equates to the emotion that he's showing at the end of The Force Awakens, he whips it over his shoulder, and that doesn't totally lose the moment, but it is so clearly aimed at the audience to make them go, oh, that it doesn't make as much sense, according to some people, in that moment with her.
Especially based on the ending of The Force Awakens.
Yes. And...
which is silly.
And that starts just a whole sequence of everybody dying inside. Pointing out that Kylo Ren, and the Knights of Ren were not important to Snoke. Snoke is not important to the story. I mean, that's not necessarily, committed just because he's dead, but the way that they killed him feels so much like it's about developing Kylo Ren as a character that it does seem to make him unimportant, even though it's clearly set up by Leia and Han Solo that character is part of Kylo Ren's journey.
It also, a lot of this stuff, really, but this in particular feels like it should be a movie 3 action.
Absolutely.
To me, say what you will, whatever. I thought it was cool that it was using the ability of the Force being able to get information from what people are thinking and feeling, and that Snoke is describing Kylo Ren striking someone down. I thought that was really interesting that Kylo Ren, and it is kind of like the same as Scott Pilgrim, where he says, I thought really hard about putting it into this other cup of coffee.
I can read your thoughts. Your will is broken. You're through.
Actually, muchacho, I poured the soy in this cup, but I thought real hard about pouring it in that cup. In my mind's eye or whatever.
What are you talking about?
You just drank half and half, baby.
But it's still cool to me that he did that. That meanwhile, he's moving the lightsaber and he's going to kill Snoke. I think that's cool. What's not cool is not explaining anything about Snoke and doing that in the middle of the second movie.
Yeah.
And not like the end of the second movie. It's like the late middle of the movie. There's another hour of movie left. And Snoke is just gone. I'm assuming in the next movie maybe they may provide some backstory, but we have no idea who he is. And like you said, it's the subverting expectations, but the wrong ones.
Rian Johnson's additions to the cast, DJ, played by
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro. Rose, played by Kelly Marie Tran. And the way Rose is written is just so horrible. Like...
We're sorry, Rose actress.
The actress is not the problem with that character. She's very interesting in the beginning. You have an immediate reason to be invested in her. And then she shows that she can be a hero by stepping up and being a character that's really obviously a Rian Johnson passion project, and shuts down Finn from trying to run. Now, she doesn't exactly understand where he's running to, and that's another theme that keeps going on, is she doesn't really understand what he's doing. She just keeps acting. She just keeps doing things. The character does. And so she shuts down Finn from trying to go get to Rey. And then she goes along with him to try to help him in Canto Bight, and then raises an alarm trying to save animals.
Star Wars is so cool because there's all these creatures and all these amazing visual effects.
She stops and waits to leave so that she could take the saddle off of one of the things, because that's what makes it worth it. And then, in the end, despite all of these confusing setbacks and a lot of reasons for them to go to many different places, Finn has a really clear arc about how DJ's betrayal makes him realize like who he cares about. And I don't care who says this is a negative, the way that Captain Phasma is treated in the movie. I really feel like Finn has a triumph and a closure for his character in fully committing to the rebels. The rebel scum line is something that legitimately gets to me, no matter how cheesy it is. And he decides he wants to fight for them, and he decides so much that he doesn't care. Like, the question is, are you willing to lose your life for a cause? The question was that in The Force Awakens, but it was about the Empire, or the First Order. And he decides no, and he runs away. But the question then was, okay, well, are you willing to die for this cause? And for a character that was brainwashed into being a stormtrooper, he makes the decision on his own, and he says yes. And he tries to make that decision, and it honestly feels like it's robbed from him. When Rose blasts out of nowhere, basically almost kills him anyways. Basically almost kills the both of them. I don't know what makes her think, I'll drive into a cannon blast and wreck us both, because that'll save everyone. And then
Meanwhile, the big giant laser is opening the door.
It is in the exact same shot that the character says, we only win by saving those we love, that the cannon blasts a hole in to murder everybody else she loves. And Admiral Holdo, played by...
you know this one.
I do know this one. Laura Dern.
Yeah,
Okay.
You got it first try.
And, which everybody knows, the issue with her is, why didn't she tell Poe Dameron what her plan was? And the arguments for why she didn't tell him the plan.
To teach him a lesson.
Right, because you're in the middle of one of the worst, like, you're about to die, and why are you teaching people lessons? And I can understand that, but whatever, it happens. Poe was going to die in The Force Awakens originally, so I'm just glad he's there. I don't know. I feel like if that had been one of the only things going on, I would have been conflicted about her character, but I never would have thought twice about her being part of the canon. The jokes undercut the tension in The Last Jedi. People say the Force is weird and new things happen that they don't think are possible. There is no established scale to measure the power of the Force. There is no... I'll go ahead and say, to give credit, there is nothing in the movies that establishes the scale of a Force push versus a Force projection versus Force lightning versus Force... you do see Luke escalate from moving rocks to supposed to be moving an X-Wing.
Well, that's explained
difficult.
as being in your head. It's like,
right, that's
it doesn't
the point.
matter.
His size doesn't matter. So it kind of even further destabilizes the idea that it takes more or less effort to do one thing
Right.
or another. And so, anyways.
Right, no. The only reference point we have to what the Force is able to do is when Darth Vader is with Grand Moff Tarkin on the Death Star and says the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant to the power of the Force. So if you break that down mathematically, the only thing we have is ability to destroy a planet, the Force.
So every criticism about what is possible or impossible with Luke, Leia, and every character in The Last Jedi...
I gotta say, you know, and I know people have problems with the Force in this movie. No, I wasn't alive in 1980, but I'm guessing that nobody was complaining when all of a sudden Luke could move objects with the Force, and they never said anything about that But they in the first one they don't. You know, the Force has power against the weak-minded. You can sense things.
Yes.
It's all in your mind stuff. And then in the second one, he's hanging upside down and he's like, lightsaber.
Yep.
And everybody... I mean, if the same nerd-type people that are around now were around back then, they might go, wait a second. There was no mention of that.
That didn't happen!
Yeah, so...
Yeah, we just wrote it off. But that's the thing that happened when we were watching the movies originally. We just wrote things off.
It's like, oh, this is how it is now.
And I think it's fair to later be critical about how some of those things would work. So otherwise, what's the point of criticism?
3 decades later?
Yeah.
Ryan has written a story that's unexpected but right. Some of the stuff that happens, people are going to be like, oh my God.
Even though I think I know it all, they throw things at me story-wise I never could have imagined.
And even though everybody knows that it's the second in a trilogy, it feels like its own thing.
Failure as a theme is just an excuse for the movie to be bad. That is one of my favorite criticisms.
Because you see, it's so meta.
No,
this
it's not
movie
that it's meta.
is a failure.
It's not that it's meta. It's that it's a safety net so that anything you could say that's wrong...
Well, it's about failure.
Right.
And we failed, so it was part of the plan.
Exactly. And I don't agree with that.
That's so stupid.
I don't agree with that. That clearly wasn't the intention. But I really liked that as a criticism for the movie.
That's such backwards thing.
It's like, of course the characters are all making mistakes and doing stupid things, because that's what the movie's about.
The movie's about failure.
Yeah, it's about that we all make mistakes.
Except Carrie Fisher told me it was about family. And that's what's so powerful.
It's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it.
It's about family in the movie where families don't matter. And
it's Arrested Development.
Oh, and also you clearly make it about if the scenes where she's in are the ones that are supposed to be about family and how the Rebel Alliance are a family, they're abandoned by the rest of the galaxy.
The lesson is sometimes you can't trust your family.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, seriously, because Holdo won't talk to Poe Dameron and share her plan. There's literally betrayal on like 3 different wavelengths. It's like, mutiny! No! Like, that's... and like, sure, you have some subtext in what's going on between Kylo Ren and Leia and Luke, and you have these few moments where they address family, and honestly, they're some of the best moments in the movie. So maybe you should have made a movie about family.
Maybe. But at least Canto Bite was good, right?
Yes, that was the big one.
It wasn't.
I don't think there is a single positive review of anything that happens on Canto Bite. Save for the few people who feel like I do, which is the casino element of it and the idea that you introduced an aspect of the world that we haven't seen before, that how do these... If the Resistance is not government funded by the Republic, and if the First Order is clearly not funded by anyone because they're freaks in this galaxy, how do they get all these ships and money and resources? It's like, well... people invest in them. Like, that's really interesting that there isn't, like...
It's kind of like YouTube advertising. Yes, the Republic was destroyed, basically. The governing body of the Republic was destroyed. Mm-hmm. There are people out there who couldn't care less. That they're just hanging out and having a good time.
Yep.
We're here for a good time, not a long time. Am I right, ladies and gentlemen? Yep. Unless you watch The Last Jedi. The whole thing is like you open your lunch bag. I know I'm talking about lunch. Have you seen me?
You guys can flash back to the last episode where he was 80 pounds heavier.
100. Maybe. When did we film that? Maybe.
You weren't on keto yet.
Oh, then over 100.
Holy shit.
Anyway, so it's like subverting my expectations. That's like I was given a lunch bag at the beginning of the day. I made your lunch, honey. Thanks. There was shit in it halfway through the day.
I'm hoping it'll be a little shocking, but I'm hoping it'll feel real and honest.